Today we're going to be delving, I'm just checking, have I frozen?
No, seems fine, Claire.
Okay, good. Today we'll be delving into sustainable water management, where we will be exploring practical strategies for protecting our water resources in agriculture. And to explore this topic, I am delighted to be joined by today's guests. We've got Andrew Court and we've got Mark Biddulph. I hope we've got Mark. I don't know, I haven't quite seen him pop in yet, but I think we're trying to get Mark in. Andrew is a mixed farmer from Staffordshire, growing winter wheat for the bread market and spring oats for the porridge market. That's exactly what we need for our breakfast this morning. It was 1 degree this morning on the dog walk. Andrew practices direct drilling and grows green manures to improve soil around his cash crops. His farm also lies in a groundwater catchment zone from which the Severn Trent extracts water for human consumption, making water management absolutely a priority. Andrew works very closely with Severn Trent, and we'll hear more about that very soon. And Mark is an agricultural advisor for Severn Trent, working in their Farming for Water team. Severn Trent's Farming for Water team collaborates with farmers to protect and improve water quality across key catchment areas. They provide guidance, support and funding to help farmers adopt sustainable land management practices and reduce water pollution from agricultural activities. The team focuses on reducing the runoff of nutrients, pesticides and soil into rivers and reservoirs, ensuring cleaner water sources and promoting environmentally friendly farming. A very, very warm welcome to you both. As we're spoiled by having, or hopefully having, two guests today, I think we're still trying to get Mark in. I am going to limit our update to just a couple of really important pieces of news. Number one, we were delighted to launch Hunter Pack produce as a leaf demonstration farm last week. We've worked really closely with Stephen and his team in our Journey to Net Zero project, and we've been truly astonished by how the business deploys integrated farm management across their farming, and also the role that technology is playing to build even more resilience into their businesses. So yeah, a huge warm welcome to Hunter Pack. We're delighted to have you in the Leaf Network family. And secondly, we've got the public consultation on version 17 of the Leaf Mark Standard now live. You've got until the 29th of November to have your say and to shape our Leaf Mark Standard. There are a number of ways to get involved, so please do go to our website, leaf.eco, and get some more information about how you might get involved. I know that over the next couple of weeks, we're hosting a series of short webinars on each of the sections within the standard. So please do go and join a webinar or have a look at the changes that we're proposing, and let us have your thoughts and views. So yeah, brilliant, fantastic. I'm just going to check in with Callum. Callum, do we have Mark before I enter into the questions so that I can know how to direct? Do we have Mark with us?
Not that I can see at the moment.
Okay, no
but
problem.
we're working on it. Hopefully it should be fine.
No worries. Anyway, the great news is, Andrew, I was going to start with you. Just before I get started, just to set a bit of context, I was participating in a panel discussion at a conference recently, and we were asked, the whole panel was asked, what is the single biggest risk to food production in the future? Of course, my mind instantly filled with lots of different answers, but we had to answer unanimously. And as I was surrounded by experts, of course, I bowed down to their better judgment. And in unison, they all said water. And I just found that so interesting. And that is how important today's discussion is. So, Andrew, if you don't mind me turning to you, a very warm welcome to today's surgery. Thank you for your time. I can see you're very, very busy because you're calling from your cab. Thank you for agreeing to share your story with us all. Please do feel free to tell us any more about your story than I shared at the opening. And then I want to ask you the question, could you share with us some of the reasons for implementing sustainable water management practices on your farm?
Okay, well, thank you, Claire. Actually, the sort of history behind our farm and the answer to the question tie in quite nicely. So I'll give everybody a little bit more background. So my grandparents moved to this farm in 1956. Quite ironically, they were on a tenant farm on a nearby estate, and the farmyard was on one side of the River Trent, and the fields were on the other side of the River Trent, and the dairy cattle had to access the grazing every day by walking over a very wooden bridge. And every winter, the torrents of the river would wash the bridge away. So they got a bit fed up with water, and decided to move to, or they bought a farm which actually had been tenanted by a branch of our family beforehand. And like every farm in the 1940s, 1950s, they began as a very mixed farm and gradually narrowed it down to becoming a dairy farm. And then when milk prices plummeted in 2010, my uncle, who was then in charge of the business, he moved out of dairy farming into suckler cow farming, and had a suckler herd. And then in 2020, right at the beginning of lockdown, we bought out my uncle and aunt from the farm and took over in our own right. So we had this formerly suckler cow farm, and my brother and I weren't sure what to do. My background is in engineering. I studied at Harper Adams, and I'd grown quite a passion for soil science in my studies. We'd done a lot about land drainage and how tillage methods affect the soil and soil structure and things like that. And I thought, oh, this, half an eye to the future. We're talking about elms and things like that. What if we're starting a business effectively from scratch? Because my uncle took everything with him when he moved out. Perhaps we should focus on a more environmental footing. So we started with the principle that we were going to try and preserve the soil. We were going to direct drill and things like that. Very interested in carbon. There was a lot at the beginning of the noises around carbon farming. And then one day, not long after we'd started, Mark turned up on our farm and said, "Did you know that you're in a groundwater catchment zone? And we as Severn Trent would like to help you implement some practices." So that really got the conversation started, as to what we could do for water and for water quality. I already knew from my university degree about field capacity and maximizing field capacity, reducing flooding, that sort of thing. I think that's an interest that every farmer has. But I'd never really thought about what the benefits were to water quality or anything like that. And the STEP scheme, which is the scheme that Severn Trent run, has really opened my eyes as to what can be achieved. Essentially from a utility company's point of view, and Mark will probably talk about this later, there's three key targets that they focus on, and it very much depends upon where you are geographically as to what your key aim is. So the first, if you're in an area where they extract from the river, they're very much interested in pesticide reduction and controlling eutrophication and things like that in the watercourse. If you're near a borehole like ourselves, we're in a very free draining sandy soil. They're more interested in nutrient and particularly nitrate leaching into that borehole. And then finally, if you're in an area where there's a lot of pit holes and things like that, and cattle have a large access to water, they're very interested in Cryptosporidia. And Severn Trent themselves have designed a series of different measures that they will help farmers to implement to help them reduce their impact on the water courses. I'm sure others will talk about irrigation and things like that, but that's not really a concern for our farming enterprise. So going back to our story, as we went down this journey with Severn Trent, we sort of built our farm around you know, how we could work with Severn Trent, what we could do for the soil and things like that. So we implement a very wide crop rotation. We're only 274 acres in total, but only 200 of those can be arable. I'm very much a believer that we should be farming for a human consumption market. I don't think that we should be growing cereals predominantly for livestock feed, but that's a personal opinion, and I'm sure others will have their own opinions. So we have a very wide rotation. This year, in fact, we're growing not only the winter wheat and winter oats as you said, but we also grow winter barley for malting. We grow winter beans to get a legume into the rotation and really change the dynamics of the soil. We grow oilseed rape for our sins, whether that's right or not, that's a whole different webinar. And this year we're growing sunflowers. Now that's a bit unusual for our rotation, in that the sunflowers are going for birdseed. It's a demand created by the conflict in Ukraine, but the hope is that once UK farmers prove that they can grow sunflowers, then we can move on to pressing them for oils and things like that. So it's a proving mission, really. So within all of that, there are elements of water management and water control, the different rooting depths, the way that we establish the crops, the cover crops that we put in between are very important. And just this whole plethora of water management that we've put together is really a key part of how we drive the farm forward environmentally and financially. I've probably skirted around the question a little bit there, but
no, I don't think you have. And gosh, wow, so much to unpack in there, Andrew. Thank you. What a great opportunity it was when, in taking on your farm, your now farm, that you had that opportunity to reset. That must have been part of how you've continued to build resilience and sustainability into your business. Have Severn Trent, you know, kind of knock on your door and say, do you know that you can do this? That's brilliant too. It's almost, you know, having the right mindset to take those opportunities and to accept those offers as they come along as well. So that's really exciting. And I love how the whole sunflowers piece now as well is kind of playing into, you know, it's an unintended consequence of a terrible, terrible situation. But, you know, it's great that there's an opportunity to test whether you can grow a different crop, and then actually that different crop can provide a new income stream in the future. So that's really testament to your business, and how you balance not just the environmental considerations, but also the kind of economic considerations within that too. So thank you. That's been a real joy to hear about your approach. I think we've got Mark now. Mark, very, very warm welcome to you. I hope you don't feel too stressed and anxious from trying to get into the Lease surgery. We've only just started.
No, yeah, sorry for being late. Some technology issues, some sort of mix up with timings of things. So yeah, sorry, I'm very late, but I am here now.
Well, Mark, you are not very late. No need to apologise, and we're so delighted to have you here now. So thank you so much. To get you started, I'm going to ask a very easy question. So I've done an intro to you anyway, Mark. But if there's anything you wanted to particularly share about yourself or your job role, please do feel free. And then I'd like to ask you, as the next question, what you believe the greatest barrier is to farmers and land managers looking to implement sustainable water practices. Yeah, what barriers are there that we need to overcome? Just a warning, Andrew, I might ask you the same straight afterwards, so let you prepare for that. But yeah, over to you, Mark. Thank you.
I still think, and I get asked questions about drainage quite a lot. I get asked all manner of things, really. And I think the greatest barrier really is available space. And agriculture isn't easy. It doesn't really matter what. We see it more in certain produce types, but it doesn't matter what you produce. It feels very tight. It feels very under pressure to make zero mistakes effectively. To effectively make every penny that you possibly can do, so that when a few things go wrong, as they always do in agriculture, you're not in the situation where you're unprofitable or something's fundamentally gone wrong. So when you give up areas or you change the practice in areas, I think there's this inherent thing within agriculture that, is it the right decision? There's very belt and braces ways of doing things in this industry, and it's sometimes easier for farms to, it's not easy at all. None of this is easy. It's more simple to stick to the ways of doing things, that so that when you question your own decisions and the things that you've done in the past, or other people question your decisions, you can't be criticized for doing something slightly different. That just means things are difficult to fit in amongst what you're already doing effectively, whether it be buffer strips, margins, different crops. There isn't many people like Andrew that, you know, just have the confidence and sometimes, you know, belligerence to try something very different and not too worried about the perhaps financial consequences. I'm sure he is worried about the financial consequences, but also what other farms think sometimes. And it's not a great industry for, you know, supporting different attitudes and change. It's sometimes quite happy when something doesn't go particularly well. So I think that's probably the biggest barrier, is the pressure that everybody's under to make absolutely zero mistakes as they go through. And doing something a bit different feels like you're opening yourself up for criticism, potential mistakes, and the fact that that might have financial implications, or it might just sort of have reputational implications where people think you've done something wrong. Agricultural fields are often quite visible. You know, we've all seen Clarkson's farm and stuff like that, where everybody notices when something doesn't go particularly well. So it keeps people in the same sort of routine. If they do things in a similar way, failures can be effectively blamed on the fact that it was a bad year, it was something else, it wasn't their decision effectively to do something different. And all of these things that potentially can help water quality are changes in management practices, or changes in things that you do with the land that could have some implications. So people tend to stick to what they know.
That is a great answer. Thank you, Mark, and really speaks into that challenge of, you know, how do farmers assess and take risk, particularly where their margins can be really, really minimal. So, and I think in some cases we find that the projects like Andrew and his cohort and his peers are involved in, working alongside other farmers, tackling similar subjects, actually can be a great way of sharing knowledge, that knowledge exchange, and enabling that risk taking, or slightly safer risk taking. So thank you for that. That's an absolutely brilliant answer. Andrew, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'd love to get your perspective as a farmer on that as well. What do you agree with Mark? Is that the biggest risk that you also identify to, you know, getting started in sustainable water management, or is there something else?
No, I think I largely chime with what Mark says. I think that quite often it does come down to finances as well. I think that certainly the neighbours that I see and people in the wider farming community, there is a question, why would I make a change when I've got a certainty that if I put XYZ inputs into a field or into an animal, I'm virtually guaranteed to get XYZ results out of that animal? Why would I make that change? I'm financially stable, and on the side of that, there's always the case that they might be paying off a mortgage or a bank loan and things like that. And if you take that larger risk, you could be, or take that risk, you could be risking a wider implication to the entire business. And there's also, I don't mean to be ageist, but there's a lot certainly within my own family where my uncle or my grandparents would say, well, we made changes in the 1950s, 60s, you know, we had CAP and reform and all that sort of stuff, and they were telling us to do the exact opposite. We've had our opportunity to be young, bright, and change things. We're just going to settle down now and just be happy with what we're doing. So I think that is a key thing. I think that understanding and knowledge is tricky as well. Organizations such as Leaf and others are fantastic at transmitting knowledge and getting people to network and exchange, which is great, but there can be some reluctance. And I mean, there's an awful lot of fantastic consultants out there that could really help businesses make small changes, but their costs are quite high, and understandably in many cases. And I think that the government fails to, and other grant schemes fail to recognize the costs involved in just getting advice as to what you can and can't do, and that there's no financial support out there for that. I have taken the step of getting involved in research projects, because 9 times out of 10 you will get that advisor paid for by the research project, and then you can make that change. But the whole country can't do that. So I'd say that a lack of education or stimulation in thought is missing. Mark's right about the neighbour pressure. It's very easy to look over the field. I have taken the extreme step of being the only arable farmer surrounded by countless dairy farmers for miles and miles and miles. So I don't really care if they look over the field and look over the hedge and see a terrible oilseed rape crop, because I'm doing something completely different to them. But also capital. Some of the changes we've made have been quite pricey ever since we've come out of COVID, and inflation has really rocketed. Some of the changes are not cheap at all. Even a rainwater harvesting system can cost an extortionate amount of money. The changes and differences it makes are fantastic, but the payback time can be quite a long time depending upon the scale of your business. So that can often be a barrier as well, I feel.
Thank you. That is, yeah, it's great to, yeah, it's great that you've had the baton handed on firmly to you, Andrew, so that you can make those decisions. But I think you're absolutely right. There is a need for more advice, affordable advice, and yeah, lots of opportunities for farmers to be able to get involved in research, in projects. Like you say, there wouldn't be the capacity for everybody to get involved, but there are lots of projects out there. We've got a constant churn of projects at Leaf that we're always asking for farmers to participate in, and there's often great rewards in all sorts of different guises. But yeah, would really encourage people to continue to look at what Leaf and our peers are doing in that space, because there is plenty of research to get involved in. Thank you both. Andrew, I'm going to start with you for the next question, if that's okay as well. Taking an integrated farm management perspective, how have sustainable water management practices directly or perhaps indirectly improved your productivity as well as your environmental footprint? Or the answer might be it hasn't, but that's, it's useful to know.
No, I think that I alluded to the first time that Mark came onto our farm and told us that we're in a groundwater catchment zone. So the key thing to reducing nitrate leaching is to always have something growing in the ground, always have a root system there. So that directly fed into cover crops far before the government introduced grants for it. So that really did alter our approach. So we were already going down the direct drilling approach. We knew we wanted to do that, but then having the ability and the funds to go out and plant cover crops in between, that has in many cases removed the need for a subsoiler. Before we put a cover crop in the ground, we will analyze what the characteristics of the soil are like to understand what properties we need to change, enhance, improve, or maintain in each field individually. So for 3 or 4 years, we've been systematically choosing the fields that have radishes growing in them, because we have quite a plough pan, a legacy from my uncle's farming practices, and utilizing the plants to really break up that plough pan and improve the soil structure to improve that field capacity. And over the last 3 or 4 years, we can compare, again, looking over the fence at our neighbours who grow a lot of feed barley for their cattle. Our barley in 2022, we're on very dry soils, but it kept growing when our neighbours' crops stopped and started to die, and that lasted for another 2 or 3 weeks without rain. So just by making simple changes like that, and has really seen an improvement in the soils. We've got a rainwater harvesting system, which is a much purer water than we would ordinarily have from the hose pipe or out the mains, and that has improved the efficacy of our sprays. So we don't need to use as much spray to get the same results. So it's really it started the farm on a journey of thinking about this resource, and conversations with Mark and research projects, and it's encouraged us to go and look down different avenues of really enhancing what we do. So I would say that the overwhelming benefit from going down the water management route is the improvements in the soils.
Thank you. That's a brilliant answer. Just as a slight tangent, or extension of that, has it improved anything on your farm in terms of, for example, biodiversity or things like that? I mean, sometimes biodiversity, the health of species on your farm could be a great indication that you're doing the right things with water and soil as well. So yeah, is that something that you also monitor on your farm, Andrew?
Absolutely. The wildlife population has certainly increased. We see an awful lot more pollinators because we're able to support them throughout the year rather than just in fits and starts. And things like hares have really benefited from that because there's always a crop standing somewhere on the farm, so they've always got that cover. And deer as well, they're around now, whereas they weren't before. Some people might say that's a bad thing, but it's always nice to see the odd stag. And owls are coming back, hedgehogs are coming back. We're seeing a huge boost in diversity all across the farm. We're putting in some wildflower patches as well, and that they're spreading throughout the farm. So in terms of environmental diversity, absolutely. We also do an awful lot of carbon auditing, another project that we started with Leaf, but we've carried on with other partners. And we are seeing huge benefits in terms of our carbon emissions. There's still some work to do in the monitoring industry, I think, and getting the regulations right. But it's we can see benefits in everything that we do.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really good to hear. Mark, I'm going to turn to you now, if that's okay again. What do you see as the role of technology, or how might technology evolve in sustainable water management on farm?
I think there's loads of things that technology can help us with. From a personal perspective, it's always really difficult to get a catchment view of things. We know that things affect boreholes or surface waters or certain things. What's really difficult and what's always the challenge is what thing is affecting what the most, where, on a sort of broad scale, without having ag advisors driving around the catchment on an almost daily basis. It's really difficult to match up the issue that we see in an abstraction point or a borehole or somewhere else effectively with the cause effectively. So I think technology could help massively for us to understand what crops have been grown in a catchment, what pathways might there be that we don't have the finances or the time to actually investigate to the amount that we would need to. And then put in some really targeted solutions, really. I am privileged to be part of an ag advisor, catchment webinar on a monthly basis where it's not all, but a large group of water companies discuss the sort of challenges that they have. And it's quite a consistent message, really. It doesn't matter if it's Propyzamide as a chemical. If you want to tackle propyzamide because it's a serious issue, you really need to know where the crops are being grown that will have propyzamide applied to them. Well, unless you did loads of surveys on a yearly basis and you thoroughly understood a farmer's rotation, which might change on a weekly basis depending on the weather, it's really difficult to ascertain where the source of the problem is. So we sort of always know that it's, source pathway receptor. We sometimes don't understand the pathways quite so well, but what are the actual sources and what's the best thing to do about it? So I'm really interested in satellite-based technology and things that could, we have cropping information, but it's nearly always retrospective. These things are going to be in the field this year, but if we had a better update about what was where at a certain time, it would be easier to target some of the interventions that you could put in place. Know that a farm consistently grows crops that might have propyzamide sprayed onto them, make sure there's buffer strips there, there's that sort of thing. So technology can help in identifying the potential risks and where we might see the actual pollutants coming from. But also extend that slightly further. Some of the technology has branched out into how much nitrogen crops receive, what's the sort of routine that they're under. Is there certain areas that show massive differences in the greenness of the crop and hence how much nitrogen is being applied and things like that, so that you could in the future we hope to look at the losses of nitrogen on farms. And we were having conversations earlier about where to start effectively, and I think that's always really the challenge, because the catchment areas are vast, and Shropshire Middle Severn, for a catchment, for example, has probably 350 to 400 farms that we could talk to about various different things to improve water quality. But which ones do I go to? I try and talk to all of them, but where do we put the things in place? Andrew's catchment has more like 20 odd farms to talk to, so it's not too bad to get a really good idea of what's going on in the ground on a fairly regular basis. So the things that effectively help us to see what's occurring on the ground before it does, and mitigate some of these problems that can go there. I really like some of the technology that's in place around. I mean, Andrew has a weather station, for example, helping farmers to make decisions about when they spray, what they do, that type of thing. Now, this stuff has always been around, and you have to start asking the question, why, if it's been around for quite a long time, has it perhaps not had some of the benefits that you see? So for me, some of the things that really help are the things that could pull it together as well. If software or tools knew that certain areas were a particular risk and they knew that certain weather conditions were going to occur, I think we've probably got still some way to go on some of the decision management systems around, should I spray this, should I do something else? Because whilst we're reliant on people on the ground all the time, it isn't dealing with some of the localized weather events and issues that we probably have. So we have really good individual bits of technology. I still don't think we're that great at pulling the information together and helping farms to make decisions based on all of the things combined. And then personally, as a last one from a personal perspective, is the challenge of grant administration is incredible. And as a personal sort of mission in my role, I've spent the last 2 or 3 years trying to work out how Severn Trent keeps track of which farms it's talked to, which ones would like to do something to improve water quality, which ones have done it, how we pull all those together and make sure that we have got evidence for this or paid something else. I think the government schemes, whilst they've made massive progress in terms of how people can apply, is still based on some sort of system to map it out, some sort of email system to send evidence backwards and forwards. It's too difficult, it's too slow, agreements take forever, all that sort of thing. And I've talked to a lot of farms, and not many right or wrong, and not many plan things several years in advance, as Andrew might do. They sort of think about what might be good things for water quality, and with the aim of doing them in the next 6 months. If a grant scheme can't keep pace with that 6 month timescale, often the things don't end up happening in the first place. So my last bit of, and it's probably not even seen as technology, but my last bit of technology is all of that stuff that could help farms know what grants would help, know what's the appropriate thing in the appropriate place, and just get it going really fast, so that if they decide they're going to grow oilseed rape and they want a margin at the side, they can apply for it. They know they've got the funding for it. They can put the margin in. They have confidence they're going to get paid, and it's all done and dusted much quicker, because I don't think we're helping currently with an impressive amount of potential funding that people could have, but a system that's really creaking under the strain of allowing those people to access it quickly and therefore actually do it, because 6 months goes past and you don't know if you're going to get the grant. Maybe it was too much hassle in the first place, so the thing doesn't actually get put in place. And with all the best intentions in the world, without some of the support that goes with it, probably back to our original point, the farm can't stand the risk of doing it themselves. So, it doesn't occur really. So for water management, those would be my things: is knowing where potential problems come from, help with the communication on farms so that they make good decisions as best they can currently, but help them with that. And then thirdly, from my perspective, is just administering these grants and getting them going a lot faster, so that farms don't have to plan things 3 years in advance about what they would like to do where. They can just decide it and go quickly with it, really.
Get moving. Thank you, Mark. I think that's a great call to action for industry. So yeah, that's brilliant. And you're right, in terms of the technology, the mapping, actually, some of that is already there. Water risk management, things like that is already there. So we do need the funders to or government to catch up. Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to come to you for one final question from me, if that's all right. And then I know that we're going to have a few questions from the audience, so I'm going to stop at that point. So Andrew, could you just let us know what one piece, maybe two pieces of advice would you share with a farmer looking to start their journey, their water stewardship journey?
I think the first thing I'd say is that there's probably something that you're doing which is improving water quality already. So simple things for an arable farmer might be that they've already got section control on their sprayer, or they might already have dose maps or things like that, which they've put in for financial reasons, but actually they're making huge strides towards improving water quality. Using rainwater harvesting is another thing that probably quite a few farms are already doing, but not for the reasons highlighted. I think that the first important thing that you need to do is understand your challenges. So are you in a groundwater catchment zone like myself, or are you growing potatoes in the east of the country and irrigation is really where you need to think about water quality and retaining water rather than making sure that nothing's leaving the farm with the water. So really understand what your challenges are. And from what I've seen, I've spoken to a number of different water companies over the years, and while Severn Trent is spectacular in the way that they do their administration of their programs, all the water companies want to talk to you. I'd advise just seeing what's out there and have a chat. You might not necessarily be in a catchment zone, but there's no reason to not have that discussion. So some are very open-minded and they just want you to put forward a proposal and they'll chuck money at you if they agree, but others are much more structured and able to give better advice. And yeah, I think those would be my two things. Recognize what you're doing already and understand what your challenges are and what you want to achieve.
That's great advice to end on. Thank you, Andrew. Well, actually not to end on, because we've got a couple of questions to come from the audience, if you don't mind. So thank you from my point of view. That's been absolutely fascinating and just wonderful stories to hear from both of you. Callum, is it okay to pass over to you to field some questions?
Sure, that's fine. We had a question from Joy about becoming a Leaf member. So I think that's probably best sorted by going onto the website and sending someone from the team an email, and we'll be able to get back to you on that.
Yeah.
We had a question from Sean Dowman, who works at FWAG, and I know used to be at a water company, I believe. So that's probably why he's tuned in today, and probably a kindred spirit, Mark. He's asking how Mark and Severn Trent measure the success of the partnership and some of the funded interventions when working with farmers.
This alludes slightly to what I was talking about before as well, really. The current and has been for 9-year measurement of how it works with farmers is through FarmScoper. So all of the things that we do with farms, some people will have come across FarmScoper before, some people will have not heard of it at all. Effectively, a great big horrendous monitoring tool / modeling tool created by ADAS. It has the catchments in there. It makes assumptions about the loading that a local aquifer or watercourse will encounter because of the type of farming that's there. We have to validate it slightly, or not slightly, significantly, because its assumptions are often wrong about what is in a catchment. So it will assume 8 chickens per whatever, because that's, a regional average for how many chickens are in the area. So we have to go and say, there isn't any chickens, there's 300 sheep, there's this, that, and the other. So each catchment sort of gets assessed to say what's exactly there. And then FarmScoper uses those numbers to assess how much loading those farms are going to put onto the local aquifer or watercourse. As we do STEPS grants or something else, they are then put through FarmScoper on the opposite side of things. So to, if we can, reduce that loading. So Hatton, Andrew's example, we know what farms are there. It goes through FarmScoper to say that Andrew has grown a number of hectares of cover crops, and then FarmScoper assumes that will reduce nitrates that leach from his fields into Hatton effectively. So through FarmScoper currently is the modelled method to assess results. We have done schemes that rely sampling. So for example, metaldehyde farm to tap scheme to reduce metaldehyde was sample based. So 24 samples across Shropshire, Middle, Severn to identify subcatchments and the level of metaldehyde in each sample. If it passed through regions and the amount went up, the farmers did not receive their payments or incentives. But if the level of metaldehyde came down or stayed below legal limits, then they received their £5 a hectare. I like the sampling. It was just incredibly intensive and expensive to do, really. So it would be very difficult. Our schemes aren't based on this, but we also need to remember that all of the catchments, priority or not, are sampled consistently for all of the things. So as ag advisors, we would get informed if certain catchments had problems as they came up. But for the scheme, through FarmScoper.
Thank you for that, Mark. Yeah, it was really interesting insight into the different modelling and sampling approaches you have to measure and that success and progress there. I think we probably only have time for one final question. And so I'll go with Kate's question to Andrew. So this is Kate Williams, who asked, Andrew, when you began your journey, if you could choose what sort of topics you would have liked more information on through, so through educational materials, fact sheets, online articles, etc. What topics do you think would be useful to have had more information on from the get-go?
I think that the answer to that is more information on soil, but soil is such a huge topic, you could break it down into so many different things. I think that growing up, and certainly the generation above me, my uncle, my mum, they're very much just interested in what you put into it and what you get out of it, like a mathematical equation, whereas soil is such a complex thing. And I'm doing all sorts of courses to improve my understanding, whether it just be simply doing basis. So I've got my agronomy and pesticide training, but also talking to farmers such as and advisors such as Niels Corfield, who's very good, and others, Michael Kavanagh, who's is in the same county as me, but he's an invaluable source of information, and all the farmers from the Green Farm Collective, just a huge wealth of information there. So I think that it's just understanding soil, and it's your education is very much a journey as well. As you walk down the road, you've got lots of different paths that you could take in your journey and in your understanding, and it's just about choosing which path you go down. But certainly for me, soil, cover crops, all that sort of stuff was very, very little information, but SFI has come along since, and now every agronomy company wants to sell you cover crops. There's a wealth of information out there. So it also depends where you are in a trend. If you're a trend setter or a trend follower, determines how much information there is for you to have.
Yeah, definitely. If you're starting trying to do something, yeah, some of the things perhaps that there was less info on 15 years ago, there's bucket loads of information on now. It's just, yeah, where there's still some gaps. That's interesting. Thanks, Andrew.
And that's where networking becomes really, really important, and not just on a local level, on a national level. Push yourself out there, go to conferences, talk to people, listen to people. It's very worthwhile, and they're always happy to talk to you.
Definitely. Thanks, Andrew. I think that'll be all the time we have for questions. So sorry, Helen, we didn't get to yours. If you'd like to send it through afterwards, we might be able to come back to you on that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Callum. Huge thank you to today's guest. Wow, what a topic. Yeah, just thank you for the rich discussion and the rich thinking that we've gleaned from that. Thank you obviously to the audience today for joining. We do so love to host these leaf surgeries, and we're thankful that you enjoy them too. And yeah, all we have to say is please join us for our next leaf surgery, which is on Friday, the 8th of November. And we're going to have a spotlight this time on biodiversity. So yeah, please do join us for that. Andrew, Mark, huge thanks. And I'm wishing everybody a lovely weekend. Goodbye.